Hey, so I, I'm hoping you notice this sign behind me. One, thanks for stopping by the channel, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Um, like, comment, share. Make sure you hit the subscription button down there. But I want you to notice the sign. It says Spring Valley City Limits, right? So, like, what's the big deal, TC? Why are you talking about this? What does this have to do with Minnesota Black Robe Regiment? First, I want to communicate um, a little bit of history. I am on the bike trail, the walking trail that Spring Valley put in years ago. This started back in 2000. I ran for uh, I ran for city council, and I've talked about this a little bit before. Resigned in a little bit of disgrace after going through a personal bankruptcy and whatnot. But one of the things that we talked about, one of the reasons why I wanted to run, was kind of related to this and that bike trail. See, I'm way out here in the countryside. I'm a couple of miles away from the actual city proper of Spring Valley. Yet Spring Valley city limits is on this sign. So what's my point? What am I getting to? Here's what TC's trying to say. Spring Valley is a local government entity, right? Local government entity. It, for lack of better terminology, represents the people of Spring Valley. Of Spring Valley. Not the people in the countryside, not the people in the county, but the people of Spring Valley. But see, Spring Valley had in its mind back in 2000 that it wanted to take part in the great southern Minnesota bike trail system that's just gone gangbusters in the last 25 years. There's a whole system of Root River trails down along the Root River, from Harmony to Lanesboro to from Harmony to Preston to the Old Barn, from Fountain down to Eisenhower's, down to the Old Barn, down to Lanesboro, down into Wayland, down into Rushford, into Peterson and Rushford, and it's miles and miles and miles of trails. And Spring Valley wanted to capitalize on that. Spring Valley's grand plan was they were going to connect the bike trail to the Root River system. And they were going to do it by running along this route that I've been walking for the last couple of days. And there's a metaphor here for us. And that metaphor is about overreach. Here I am, a couple of miles from town, in the middle of what should be a farmer's field, and Spring Valley has claimed this territory for itself. And I was against that back then. And I'm still against that. Now, am I out here on the bike trail? Sure, I am. I'm out here on the bike trail / walking trail. But this is about overreach. See, what we're seeing in our society and in our culture right now, when it comes to politicians and elected and appointed servants, this isn't new. See, the city of Spring Valley voted to take people's property from them through the use of eminent domain law. They went out to the farmers and said, hey, we'll buy your land from you and we'll give you fair market price, but we want to buy it from you so we can put this bike trail through. And several farmers stood in their way. And the city of Spring Valley said, how dare you? We're going to execute eminent domain. Now, if you don't know anything about eminent domain, I would suggest that you go and you check it out, you look it up. But basically it says that a governmental entity can use the power of eminent domain to declare that the public would be better served by your property being taken from you and put to public use than if you would be allowed to keep that property and use it the way you see fit. And that's what they did. The city of Spring Valley used eminent domain on a couple of farmers who stood in their way. They took their property. Now, they had to pay them for it, but they took their property from them. And for what? Why? What was the point of that? So that I could stand out here in the countryside and talk to you about the fact that government overreach is not new. The reality that government oversteps and overreaches and does things to private citizens that it has no business doing, and declaring it for the common good and for the public good, is asinine. It should not be allowed to be. Why? What good does this serve the people of Spring Valley? We can't walk on the streets in town. We can't walk on the sidewalks in the city of Spring Valley. And you know what? The bike trail never ultimately ended where it was supposed to end. It ended out at a campground. A campground for the city of Spring Valley, which itself is there again a couple of miles away from the city proper. My friends, when are you going to wake up? When are you going to realize that what's happening right now is not just happening right now? It's been happening for quite some time. And when are you going to wake up and realize that the only way that this stops is if you get involved and you do something? Because if you can't get involved and do something, the next piece of property they take is going to be yours. The next person that they force the jab onto for the coof is going to be you. Whether you agree with all of this stuff or not, sooner or later the power of the state can be turned against you when they decide it suits their good. When they decide that it suits the people, that it's for the common good, for the greater good of the population. Even if it never pans out, and even if they don't have justification for it, the power that you support them having to use against other people can be used against you. Which is why we can stand here today and we can look at that sign that says Spring Valley City Limits, even though we're a couple of miles away from the city of Spring Valley. You get it? Overreach. It's what's killing our country because you're allowing it to happen. Enough's enough. Never again. Sic Semper, Tyrannis.